Hello, and welcome to the Alchemist Inkwell.
This is your spiritual podcast for grounded people.
I'm Emily.
And I'm KristaLyn. And today we are bringing back truly like one of the guests we've had that people have spoke the highest about. And this is Camden Maurer, who knows tons of stuff about runes and even more about runes than he was able to share with us last time. So we brought you back, Camden, to share even more.
I'm back. Hi, glad to be here.
Yes. Oh man, I'm so excited too because this is perfect. This week we have our first Deity Academy where it's going to be the Norse Pantheon. So this is going to be extra positive stuff for our people to listen to just in time for that recording. So thank you, Camden, for your perfect timing.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah.
So what's been going on with you and your growth since the last time we talked? We know you've been diving into runes even more, but give the people more info. What's been happening?
What has been happening? I decided I wanted to go back for a master's degree, so that took center stage for a little bit in runes. Runes has been the carrot on the stick, so to speak, to kind of get me through that and deity work and things like that. So we went through a very interesting period of trying to reconcile getting a science degree while also learning more about spirituality and history at the same time. And we went through this period of me and everyone else that I got to rant to about it, got to talk about how I went through the cycle of, hey, the runes are super magical. Oh my gosh, the runes are just an alphabet. They're not super magical. Oh no, what do I do? Oh my gosh, no, wait, maybe they are super magical again. Oh no, people are using runes for bad things again. I don't know what to do. And then it's like this. So we keep, it's a lot of back and forth. But we cycled back. We're on the upswing again. Now I can justify everything via historical sources and personal experiences. And yeah, I've got... trying to think what else. Ways to tap into the runes that don't rely on can I say Nazis? Is that allowed?
You can say Nazis.
Okay, cool. I didn't know if this is like TikTok where certain words.
The hell no, this is our platform.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, so that way...
no censorship.
Some ways to tap into runes that don't rely on Nazis or people that have ties to white supremacist organizations. That was the biggest thing that happened during this little break, is all of my rune sources kind of fell off a little bit, because the tricky part with having living authors is that there's always a small chance that they might embarrass you later by being a Nazi or like being a terrible person.
No, straight up though.
Your heroes.
No, seriously.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So it's a great topic. And do you mind if we kind of start with where are you at now on justifying runes as a practice and a magic?
Yeah. Justifying runes as a magic and a practice. I think the biggest takeaway for me personally has been there's nothing more magical than a writing system. There's nothing more magical than the ability to communicate, the ability to record history, the ability to save stuff for future generations to use and to... It's the stuff you leave behind that people are going to see when you're long gone. So what's more magical than that?
Yeah. Well, and I can support that. I've actually been studying runes a little bit, not nearly to your capacity, but because we're going to Iceland. So I've been studying about local folk magics there and reading about the different futharks and how they've developed pre-Christian Iceland and post, and in multiple civilizations. Just like every civilization figured out astrology eventually, every civilization realized the magic of words. And whether that was spoken word or written word, it was important that you were putting shape and form to a concept, right? So what is creation if not putting something into the air, which is what you do with your words, especially when we think about vibration levels and stuff, right? And so if you can write those things out, which then takes the vibration of that word and puts it into something even more solid or denser or at a denser level, it's incredible magic. There are actually languages, the Futhark included, that's considered fire languages. And they are languages of creation that are extra potent. So just to add even more context to your own research that you've already done, which I love, by the way. People who do more research, I want to centralize them all day long.
It's like I'm fighting off Nazis and white supremacists with a stick here, but
Yes.
we're doing the best we can.
You know what? Let's give as many people sticks as we can.
Right. So on that note, I mean, it's been a time for Nazi unveilings, I will say. So you said some of the, your resources have gotten there. And I think people if you're not super in this community, especially if you're not someone who practices Norse paganism in any type of way or rune systems in any type of way, you might not fully understand how a lot of these symbols have been co-opted. Would you want to just talk briefly about like how they've been co-opted, things to look out for, what you mean by saying like white supremacists have been using these, just so people have that reference? Because I think people kind of know that and maybe shy away from the runes because of that, but they don't even know how exactly that presents. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. If there's anything I could have gone back and fixed about the first episode you guys had me on, this is what I would have front-loaded at the very start, for sure.
Yeah.
Great.
I have a list. Hold on.
Okay. List us out.
We're here for it.
Come with your list.
Okay, so brief, teeny tiny timeline. There's a period of time where the alphabets are being used actively. That kind of starts to go away as Christianization creeps into the Nordic Scandinavian countries. Those kind of become a thing of the past. They adopt the Roman alphabet. Everything's hunky-dory, more or less. Skip to this occultist named Guido von List. He is like, oh, we should explore this alphabet and get back to like the roots of our culture. And then the Nazis in the 50s really loved that. So they really adopted a lot of his methodology and teachings, which were very anti-Semitic and this, that, and the other. That's where we start to see the Nazis especially start to integrate runes into their uniforms. So there's Soilo, which is kind of shaped like a lightning bolt. It's the S rune. Put two together, you get SS. They take Othala and they add little feet to it. So they're also not just like taking the runes, they're also making modifications to the runes. Much like how we see how they co-opted the swastika. It's kind of a similar thing. And they started to display them. We've got the SS symbol. We've got, what else am I thinking of? The Othala tier, the arrow-shaped rune also kind of becomes a symbol for that as well. Then World War I happens, World War II happens. All of that kind of goes away-ish. And then there's a big resurgence of occultism and spirituality in the 80s. Runes come back into fashion. And then spot the Nazis starts getting significantly harder.
Seriously, though, the dog whistles have become so small.
Yeah.
And now we're getting more and more of them, so prolific that it's like kind of easier to see because, the Red Hat people have given permission to be Nazi out loud again.
Yeah.
But it's very tiny things that if you don't know, it's really hard to see.
And what that kind of looks like, especially like now, is you'll still maybe see like certain specific runes. So Soilo, Tiwaz, and Othala are probably the big three that you'll see the most frequently. And that's just like on a visible level. What's probably more common now is people involved in runic spaces or Norse paganism spaces are just kind of quietly giving money to those organizations is what it kind of looks like now. So, and I get to talk about my mortal enemy and bane of my existence. His name is Edred Thorson, or also Stephen Flowers. Very prolific writer for all of the runic resources that we kind of use now.
Yeah.
It is really hard to swing a cat and not hit a book that his writings haven't touched to some degree. Everything was hunky-dory at first, and then it's on his Wikipedia page, but I'm still going to say allegedly for the reasons, but allegedly he is donating money to far-right organizations and is very heavily involved in what's called the Neo-Volksisch movement, which is just neo-Nazis. That's probably what's more common than anything. It's very quiet. They try to fly under the radar. Very disappointing, obviously. But like, if you see that author, that's a no-go.
What a dick.
Yeah. And it's like, even I found news sources and I was like, okay, we're going to be good. This source is awesome. He's going to, like, he forwarded, like, diversity and equity in this organization. And in the forward of his book, he's like, thanks so much to Stephen Flowers for letting me use his translate. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Come on. It's not one of ya.
Somebody else translate this, please.
No, yeah. And other people have, thank God. So, but I don't. It's the age-old question: can you separate the work from the person who did the work? This, that, and the other. But yeah,
It's
living
hard.
authors. It's tricky. Prose Edda, poetic Edda, great. Whoever wrote those, long dead. I don't have to worry about them saying anything new.
Yeah.
Their problematic shit already happened,
Right.
so we're good. I know. I mean, I kind of, just on a personal note too, like even for me, I've slowed down on doing my my book sleeve tattoo because I'm fucking terrified.
gosh.
J.K. Rowling and Neil Gaiman, fuck you both. And not that I have Harry Potter tattoos or Neil Gaiman tattoos, but people do and are now
Well, yeah,
super
what would
boned.
happen? Yeah.
Because living author stuff and living creator stuff right now, people that you don't expect are now doing just wild things in so many ways, and it's mind-boggling. Like it's really a lot. And it's unfortunate though, because a lot of, to your point, like talking about Stephen Flowers, there's a lot of very foundational creators from a bunch of different pagan systems, bunch of different translation things, a lot of things of that nature that everybody else based stuff off of, because they were unproblematic for a while and they were the best resource. And now it's like, psych.
Yeah.
And you have to backtrack that. And that's challenging, like genuinely challenging. And a lot of people are shying away from that too. I think this is just a total side tangent on my own space, but I've noticed that because of the state of cancel culture and social media and those types of things, the people who deserve it, like Stephen Flowers, who should be canceled, are getting bypassed in favor of like, well, this person, and like then it becomes like this infighting thing. So it's hard to navigate those spaces when you're just trying to get the information to do the right magic.
Yeah. Well, and on that, so you said you've researched other sources and stuff. Do you have a source that you would recommend the most right now, knowing that we may get better sources later or discover things or whatever? What do you feel the most comfortable with today?
Yeah. All of that said, so the downer had to front load all of that. So let's get to the actual stuff that you can use.
Is there anything that you wanted to front load that we missed? By all means.
The only
mic
other
is yours.
thing I think that is super important is you'll also run into reconstructionists. There's this thing where you want to get as close to the original source and replicate the original practice as best as you can. I'm just going to tell you now, that ain't ever going to happen with Norse sources unless someone finds a magical book that is like in its entirety. It's all guesswork.
Yeah.
So that reconstructionist thing can also just kind of lead into some more neo-Nazi stuff, because then you get reconstructionists that are like, oh, well, you can only practice this if you're of Norse descent, if you have blah, blah, blah. White people want to have a close practice so bad. I could talk about it all day. So, I think keeping in mind that Norse paganism and runes is a living tradition is going to be super important going forward. So that's the only other thing I think I'd want to tack on.
I also, just on that note too, because this is a particular passion of mine. Obviously, I got my start in paganism as far as like a structured spirituality space. I started in Hellenistic paganism, and honestly, ancient cultures, their whole thing was to disseminate it to as many people as possible and get as many people on board as possible. And so whenever, like I saw recently, this was very recent, a video on Instagram by an artist I follow who creates Norse pagan art, like very much, like it's very much just depictions of the gods and goddesses and done in like a really beautiful, classy way. And someone commented like, this is my culture and I'm tired of it being taken to be used this way. And I was like, one, it's not your culture, because even though your culture may be used to, if you are very much actually from Norway or someplace in Scandinavia, maybe your culture used to worship those gods. They don't anymore. This is not a cultural thing anymore. Two, you're missing the fucking point, because it was supposed to be like, that's why they conquered, was to put their culture other places. And three, this person is respecting, honoring, and getting more people to pay attention to your culture. And everyone in the comments was like, yeah, this person lives in the United States. They definitely took a DNA test and had like 0.5% like Norwegian DNA. And I was just like, oh my God. There are practices that are closed. Those are practices that are closed for a reason. There's not just because we want to be elitist, which I think people misunderstand when it comes to closed practices, where people are like, well, they're just trying to close it so they can have their own special thing. Like, that's not it.
No,
it's because those deities or those practices will not fucking work for you if you are a white person, or if you are a person of a different color than the system that it was made for, or of a different ethnicity. Like, that is why it is a safety thing. It's why it is. And like Norse paganism, things like that, those are ancient cultures, ancient practices that inherently are dead on a cultural level that we are now bringing back and trying to revive and connect so that they don't completely disappear and don't just become ancient history without any context that can be helpful now, which they can be. So anyway, I could also go off on that, but the reconstructionist drives me fucking crazy. So just gonna like...
Well, and almost every tradition has that category of people within it. Like astrology, don't even get me started, right? Like there's so much in astrology, in theology, all over the place, where people are like ad fontes, right? As close to the source as you can get, which is great as like a let's get close to the source, not let's define the source, put it in a box and say that we know everything about the people who were creating it. One of the biggest things that I love so much about books about translations that I read, because is that they really emphasize how we will will never truly understand the mindset of the people who were living that day.
No.
We will not. So we have to stop trying. And
I don't even
think that
understand
really
my
does
mindset when I've written something like a
don't.
year ago. I'll read it back
Yeah.
and be like, what the fuck was I thinking
I
about?
changed my mind like thousands of times today.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it also
Anyway.
needs to start to apply to like now. Like there's Rido, which means cart. No one drives a cart. You got like you could pull a rune and it's trying to warn you like, hey, you're gonna get a flat tire. But if you're looking at it and it's at its like most historical source, it's talking about a cart. And you're like, okay, travel, blah blah blah, and the runes may be like, no, you're gonna get a flat tire. I need you to think about this in context of your car. So
Yeah.
you need everything needs a little updating every so often.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. When you're using something as a divination, like you're saying, this reveals, right, that the runes are an alphabet. But if you're using them as a magical way to connect with an external energy source, they're going to use it in a way that makes sense to you. That's the point. It's a bridging of language barriers in that case. That's what divination really is. So I really love that you bring that up, that we can kind of put that mindset around it.
That being said, sources I love
Yes.
that you can use. I love Jackson Crawford on YouTube with my whole heart. He's so cool. He takes a more historical approach, and so far, fingers crossed, nothing crazy problematic has cropped up.
Yay.
Cross my fingers with you.
Yeah, no, seriously. Jackson Crawford, really awesome. He has an Intro to Runes like beginning course where he walks you through a lot of the historical context. He's got degrees, got references. It's really rad. He's got translations, which is even better. I think I own all of his books. He translated the Havamal, which is from the Poetic Edda. He translates the rune poems, which are very important, and hopefully we can touch on a little bit later. I will always, I don't know if you can see it, The Way of Fire and Ice by Ryan Smith. Door, love. He has a chapter on runes. It's pretty digestible, super easy. Funnily enough, my partner actually gave me this book. It's actually his, technically, but I've co-opted it for my own use. The Little Giant Encyclopedia of Runes by Serona Knight.
I love that.
It's
That's
very
really
cute. It's adorable. Also super easy to use. She also brings in like tarot associations and elemental associations. I think there might even be astrological associations. So you get a lot of her thoughts and feelings of what the runes feel like. Because there's a tendency, I think, to try to make runes separate from other systems, but when you're looking at like tarot and runes and like astrology kind of like together, it's like, to use Rido again as an example, like, okay, so this cart kind of feel it, like we see the same imagery on the chariot, so like maybe there is this element of like willpower, even though it's not explicitly outlined in any of the rune poems. So really trying to connect the dots from like other systems really helps in that realm.
Just drawing those universal archetypes. That makes sense.
Yeah. And then I haven't read it, but people on TikTok have been telling me about it. It's called Queering the Runes
Okay.
by Siri
Love it.
Vincent Plouffe. I've never read it. I will add that caveat. But everyone that has commented it a handful of times, says that apparently she's lovely. She also has, on her website, she has fascism stuff on there and anti-white supremacy stuff on there. So she green flag from the get-go.
Love that. Yeah. We'll take it. We'll
Yeah,
take it.
no, for real.
Awesome.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Writing those down.
Yeah, no, they're good. So far, so good.
So you talked about the runic poems. Would you want to elaborate on that a little bit? Because like
Yes.
in our first episode together, we talked about how people can start working with runes and kind of the basics there. But we would love to hear more about that because that's adding a whole other layer.
Yeah. And I think if I could go back and redo anything, if someone had given me runes and the rune poems, I think that's the way to really kind of get started. So we have the Elder Futhark, we have the Younger Futhark, and we have the Anglo-Saxon Futhark. Those are the three that we see the most prominently. And we've got accompanying rune poems that go with them. Funnily enough, there is no rune poem for the Elder Futhark. We're able to name the runes in the Elder Futhark because of how similar the Younger and the Anglo-Saxon look. And so the Elder Futhark names are reconstructed from the rune poems that describe the Anglo-Saxon and the Younger Futhark.
Weird. Okay.
Yeah.
So cool to know, though.
It's very neat. And small correction from, it's not really a correction, more of an elaboration from last time, is Elder Futhark's got 24. If you're looking to learn less runes, you can learn Younger Futhark, which is only 16. And if you're trying to be a little more ambitious, you can learn the Anglo-Saxon, which is 29. So you get a little bit more in there.
Interesting.
The rune poems themselves, though, we've got an Anglo-Saxon rune poem, an Icelandic rune poem, a Norwegian rune poem, and a Swedish rune poem. We don't really use the Swedish rune poem because it's from like the 1900s. It's very pretty, though. It's very cool sounding. And we're not quite sure what the function of the rune poems is. We're not sure if it's meant to be a mnemonic device to help people learn the alphabet. We're not sure if it has an occult meaning attached to it. But in the Icelandic poem and the Anglo-Saxon poem, they more or less go, the format is more or less like A is for apple. Apples are abundance and harvest. That's the kind of general format we see. So we see Fehu. Fehu says F is for fertility and abundance and things
I
like
love
that.
this. I wish every culture has mnemonic devices for state.
No, for real, yeah. Yeah, and so people have kind of attributed, like, okay, this is what this rune means, and this is how it lines up with other texts, so maybe this is what it is. But yeah, if the translations are tricky to get a hold of. I know Jackson Crawford has a couple on his channel. Otherwise, you may need to get like an online library account to get a hold of some of these translations, because they're not written in English, so you need someone to translate them for you. But yeah, spending time with the rune and then the rune poem and just that alone, and you like journaling about it or meditating on it, I think will give you a lot more than any book could probably ever teach you. What was the other thing? Oh, and then like in there are like other associations. So we have like Isa, which is ice. So you have the rune, you have the rune poem, but on top of that you could also think about ice in like the context in which it was written, like so like bitter winter is like ice is kind of a dangerous, deadly thing. You could think about it in a modern context, like, okay, what does ice mean to me? It means freezing. It could be a cooling down instead of like a heating up. It could be an internal thing as opposed to an external thing. So trying to relate it to the elements and to what it means to you more, I think is probably the most helpful thing. But they're very cool. The rune poems are great. That's where we get all of the attributions that we have for all of the runes anyway. Otherwise, they're just letters.
Freaking amazing.
I was going to say, you explain it so well. I hope you're open to the idea of, if you're not already, eventually teaching people.
That's the plan.
I was hoping.
I'll give you guys the inside scoop because I'm announcing it
Lean
later
in.
today. There will be, I'll have my own podcast here coming out on the 26th. So, Wells of Weird podcast, for anybody listening, you guys have the inside scoop. I'm sure. I'm posting it later today at the time of recording, so I don't know if it's that inside.
This
but...
is such a great way to start your Saturn return. I'm so excited. For anybody who's wondering, I've seen Camden's chart.
Yeah, I was like, well, I don't know what's happening in May. Emily said something was happening in May. KristaLyn said there was something happening in May. At the Sacred Spaces Gathering, something's happening this summer. So I was like, well, we're just going to proceed as planned and see what happens.
Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the plan for teaching wise so far. So no master's degree really frees up a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet.
It's so cool that you did that. That's amazing. Cool.
I really love, first of all, I am so thankful that the Nordic peoples wrote these poems down. I mean, having studied so many other cultures, I'm like, man, that would be so freaking handy to have. That's amazing. But I love that you're teaching from that space too, of both, not just the historical context, but also the like, personally, you also have to understand what ice means to you, or personally you have to understand what cart means to you in relation to your own life. Because that's always the other layer. And I think that you can get really out of balance going one way too hard or the other way too hard, right? If you do just historical context, I feel like it really struggles to bridge the gap between now and then. And if you do just your own personal meaning, then you kind of forego a lot of the power that comes from that space. So sitting in that happy middle, I think, is really powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, I hope everybody who's listening is hearing the attention that you're paying to the rune and the spirit behind the rune and how it can relate to the person. There's a really amazing nuance that you have that I admire a lot in both someone who would be doing readings for other people. Are you doing readings for other people? And someone who's teaching and podcasting and stuff. That's really, really cool. And again, you're podcasting. So this is going to be another excellent resource for people. That's fantastic. Do you know what you're going to name the podcast? Did you say
So it's called the Wells of Weird podcast. So we've,
Right.
all of my links have also kind of gotten a little bit of a facelift. Turns out having everything under your personal account, algorithms hate that.
Deeply.
So, and now I'm Wells of Weird on everything now, which is very fun and exciting.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the Wells of Weird podcast should be good.
I love it.
during this like little period where I haven't seen you guys, in getting fed up with all of the rune sources kind of falling off because the authors are questionable. I'm like, well, I just have to write the book myself then.
Yes.
That's what needs to happen.
Correct,
I'd
it
read that.
is.
This is like a soft launch of that.
Fantastic. Guys, get in early.
No, for real. Before I figure it out.
So I have a random rune question then for you. Obviously with a lot of tarot and even with like occasionally like Lenormand and other types of card systems, you can have upright and upside down meanings. I know with runes, there's many different ways to cast them. What is your thought on right side up versus upside down, or just doing it in like the casting lot style where they fall where they may and there's no directional? Like what's the difference vibes? Is there upside down, right side up? Like what are your thoughts?
It's okay. So we see this thing in the 80s. I talked about it a little bit. There's this big resurgence in occultism, and everyone wants to get in on that action. So a lot of like the predominant like tarot texts and rune texts really kind of overlap during that period. So tarot cards have reversals. People start giving runes reversals. There's really, again, we can't reconstruct anything, so everyone's just kind of making it up as their own system. So there are some authors that use reversals, and there are some authors that don't use reversals. And ultimately, it kind of comes up to personal preference. As of right now, I currently don't use reversals. I think that, how am I going to word this? I think stuff is hard all the time, so I don't need to add more bad meanings to runes. There's already like 4 or 5 in there that already mean like hardship. Like 5 out of like 20 is pretty good, like odds wise.
So you're basically saying if you're going to say hardship, bring out the hardship rune.
Yeah. And then there's also an intuition element on top of that as well. So like you could pull a rune that doesn't really have like a super positive or negative connotation and still be able to extrapolate like, oh, maybe there's too much of this energy, or maybe there is too little of this energy that I'm missing. So that's at least with reversals in general, that's kind of what I've taken them to mean. Like it could be an excess or a deficit of some kind. And if you couple that with like a like quote unquote like reversal rune or like a negative rune, like then that paints that picture a little bit clearer as well. So, but yeah, you can pull them like tarot cards, you can cast them, you can drop them however you want, but it's really, it kind of comes up to how does this spread make you feel? Yeah. And what images come to mind, because that's really, same thing happens with tarot. I've also, as a result, been reading a lot of tarot books as well, because those techniques still apply to a different divination system.
So I really love how, again, what you're saying highlights again. It reminds me of that trend that's going on that's like, I almost forgot this is what it's all about. When you get into forms of divination, it's really all about the reader, the person being read, and whatever is informing the tool, right? So you're really showing that you understand that the runes will give you the message because whatever's communicating through the runes will know what you're giving them to work with. So I just really love that you highlighted that. Second, just to kind of piggyback off of that, how do you recommend casting runes? Is there like a spread where you like draw one, or do you dump them out, or is there a preferred way?
There is a fun tarot book, and the author says you only need 3 spreads. She was like, you need a single card pull, a 3-card pull, and the Celtic cross. And for runes, I would say it's pretty similar. Like, you really only need 1, 3, or 10. And if you're wanting to introduce a little more chaos and opportunity for synchronicity and validation, casting them and throwing them is definitely going to bring you even more randomness and flavor, for lack of a better term.
So first of all, I love that, by the way, correct. That I think you only need those 3 spreads too. By the way, this is just a random antidote. The other day, Rebecca was pulling cards right before Sacred Spaces Getaway, and she's just like randomly pulling cards, and she accidentally did a Celtic cross spread for herself.
Yeah.
And I was like, do you know what you just did? And she was like, no, these ones just stood out to me. I just kept like, I need to pull more and more. And then I laid them out like this. I'm like, that's the Celtic cross. Intuitively, you pop that into there. Okay. So this is going to be an important spread for you. Just going to like launch that out. But I think that's also what's really neat about the runes, and this also doubles for like the Om or the Owam, depending on how you say that too. I've heard both. Is they're also talismanic, which is really interesting too. So what's your thought on that? I mean, that side of it, using the runes as a talisman, combining the runes to make a talisman. Like, what is your vibe and feelings about that? Because I think a lot of people are looking for help in that area at the moment. So I know that's the other like superpower they have, that tarot cards are not as talismanic. They're just for divination.
Right. It's so, I'm trying to think. Hold on. Talismanic, yeah. So again, the 80s the 80s and 90s were really a booming time because that's also where we see really a big uptick in chaos magic and sigil work and sigil creation. Runes kind of becomes a part of that. There's a little bit of historical evidence of using runes as like talismans, but it's more similar to like writing out a manifestation as a sentence. So like we've got like an amulet that basically on the back says, this amulet will ward off sickness. So coming back to the sigil creation method, that's when we there are bind runes historically, but they're kind of like, they're still kind of more of a shorthand than like an actual like symbol that or sigil that you can kind of return to. But like from the 80s onward, boy, do we see that crop up a lot. So I think it relates to this idea of archetypes. So in tarot, we've got some archetypes. In the runes, we have archetypes, but there's no like picture to go along with that.
Yeah.
And so this is why the rune poems are really just so important, because it gives those archetypes to those symbols. So like Algi's is often like a protection sigil or a protective talisman. We talked about that a little bit the last time. But it's protective because the rune poem says that it's, one of the rune poems describes it as like a blade of grass that like cuts people who try to cross it, or like a thicket that is impenetrable. And so that's why we attribute it kind of as a protective rune. So I was quite ambitious the last time I was on, because I was like, yeah, I make my sigils by sound. Those got too complicated, actually, as it turns out. So a way to like streamline that is to look at the runes and what they represent via rune poems, and that kind of gives you a guiding space to go. So for bind runes, so let's say we want to protect, so we'll use Algi's, which already has a protective quality, but then we may need to flavor that protection a little bit more. So like I have a bind rune for my car, for example. So she passes her smog check and doesn't get in an accident. We'll combine Algi's with Rido together to make a bind rune. And so now we've got protection, but specifically protection for your cart, or protection for travel.
Gotcha.
I've even, I'm trying to think other ways to use them in that kind of context is, I jokingly say I use runes at the gym as well. So like if I'm trying to push through a last set using like Thurisaz, which is like Thor's rune, like to really kind of power through, I'm like, okay, we're thinking of the rune. Like I'm holding that in my mind as I'm trying to push this heavy object.
Yep.
I
do
love
that with
that,
Mars.
though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that is a perfect use of magic system.
Yeah, I love that. So, okay, with that, because here's something I get into, people will always ask me about astrological talisman tattoos. Just for reference, I don't think it's a good idea. But what do you think about people who use runes for tattoo purposes?
We talked about this a little bit last time too, and it's still a no for me, dog.
Okay. wasn't sure if that had developed in a different direction.
It's
always worth saying.
It's a lot. It's
still a no from me, dog.
I was a little coy about it last time, but I'm gonna say I keep running into people that are like, yeah, I was gonna get runes tattooed on here, and I'm like, which ones?
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity. It's always the same. It's always the same 2 to 3, which are the ones that are like the neo-Nazi dog whistles. And I'm like, I know it means protection. I know it means family, but like you're gonna end up hanging with the wrong crowd on accident. None of them have been neo-Nazis, thankfully. But I think if you're gonna get rune tattoos, you might just have to. I was gonna jokingly say, you just gotta get the whole alphabet tattooed on you, because that's safe. That's not any one particular rune. Or if you're gonna make a sigil or bind rune, you gotta really make sure you don't have an accidental swastika in there. Make sure you don't have an accidental other dog whistle in there. I will say, boy, is that a huge commitment. Like, you're really committing to that energy by like putting it on your body. So like there's what is it? The law of unintended consequences, I think is what it's called. So like, I think permanent marker is a better way to go, because there's always a little bit of takesy-backsies in that.
Well, I will also say that you can get other Norse symbology that's not even close to dog whistle stuff if that's what you're wanting, right? I think a lot of times people are like, I'm doing the runes because it's magic and I feel connected to the Norse stuff. But I mean, like, you can get a Norse horse-looking creature. You can get like a Norse, I think not cross quite exactly, but like different things in that kind of capacity that are not necessarily focused on just the runes, that are also not dog whistles. Like, they're just pretty images. So that's another option. Like if you really wanted to do a Nordic tattoo, if you already have a rune tattoo, you're good. We're not saying like you're cursed for life, but
it's one of those things though, like know before you go.
Well, and KristaLyn talked about it the last. I just listened to the episode this morning just to
I was like, you're
double
really
check.
well versed.
It's because I just listened to it because I was like, oh, I actually didn't do as bad of a job as I thought. But
yay!
But the best example you provided, KristaLyn, was like getting a tattoo in another language that you don't fully understand. So like you don't want to end up with like a rune tattoo that you think says "I love my mom" and it's actually like Nazis come hang out with me.
yeah, that would real suck.
It's also, it could also be the equivalent of like getting the alphabet tattooed on you, which isn't a bad thing. So again, this is no hate to anybody with a rune tattoo. I'm just so we're aware. It's direct to camera.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there are less permanent ways to experience that, and also cooler imagery to use too.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, even if you look up like artifacts, like Norse artifacts, and find an image from there that you resonate with a little bit more, and then you can actually look at more history stuff. Like there's so many ways to do it that just, I don't know, are cool. They're cooler than just the classic bind rune combination symbols.
Yeah. Or
we know what we're talking about.
What is it? The Helm of Awe is another really popular one that I see. It's very good. That's a good example of a bind rune. That's a bazillion things in there.
Yeah.
So, also fun fact, not a Viking thing. It came much later.
I was going to say, it doesn't have historical context in the way people think it does. So.
It's cool looking, though.
Yeah. It's very cool looking. There's a lot of things, and I honestly, the 80s are a hotbed for this, but also like late 1800s are a hotbed for this. Both are like revitalist times for spiritual movements, which is also very interesting because us right now, it doesn't feel like a trend the way that it was in both of those time periods. It's more of like a sustained thing, which is just a really cool space to exist in. So just to throw that out there, like, I mean, on our side, from where we're at, we're now in a period of, I mean, for me, it's been like 20 years, but in general, I think spiritual stuff is not necessarily just a trend right now. It has a lot of longevity to it. It's really an actual returning to source kind of energy, which is really cool. So if you're like, oh no, there's these trendy periods where it happened, like, yeah, but we're not in one. Like, this is not that. But I will say the late 1800s as well as the 80s were really hotbeds for like, I made up this thing. It's ancient. Like, for a long time, I actually thought that a lot of tarot symbology and stuff came from ancient Egypt because there was a lot of sources from the 80s, actually dating as far back as like the 60s, that said that it did. And then you look back and it's like, no, not at all. That's not where it came from in the slightest. But there was a lot of that kind of being claimed to give more power to what was being created. So things like, you know, the helm, like you just mentioned, like, yeah, that was just them being like, this is ancient. It's not.
It's not. You see that a lot too. A little bit. It's like it's kind of part of the. That's why the Elder Futhark is so fancy and so cool. Is because it's elder. It's the older of the alphabets, but it also has the least amount of information, which means you can kind of say whatever you want about it.
Wild to me. I did not know that till this podcast episode. I thought it had the most information, which is why we used it the most.
Yeah.
But the fact that the younger Futhark and the Anglo-Saxon Futhark, like,
right, like they added to it. Yeah.
And it's cool because you can kind of piecemeal it back a little bit because a lot of the runes look very similar, and like even when you're comparing it to like our alphabet, you can still kind of see a little bit of influence because all those sources that we have are written by like Roman scholars and Christian scholars on top of that. So they're not writing in a younger Futhark or anything like that, but everything still kind of has an influence on it. From the Anglo-Saxon, which has the most letters because it's incorporating elements of the Elder Futhark and the Younger Futhark together, and are making runes that like I don't even know the name of because that's a personal mission is to learn the other alphabets, but we're still working on the first. And that's the Way of Fire and Ice book also kind of breaks down each alphabet as well with their meanings as well. So it's a great resource for that too.
Well, do you have any final thoughts you'd love to leave the listeners with before we hop off here?
I think for a little Easter egg, I suppose, for anyone that's doing Deity Academy with y'all, if you're looking for validation from the Norse Pantheon, the runes are going to be the easiest way to get it. I guarantee it. You've got runes that are associated with deities explicitly, like Tyr is Tyr, Thurisaz is Thor. Thurisaz is also giants, so if there are any giants that are reaching out to you, that could also be that. But it's very quick and easy. A super common practice that doesn't have a ton of historical basis, but kind of really just kind of comes around, is the rune could be the first letter of a deity's name. We see that with Laguz, which is the L rune. It doesn't really have any association with Loki, but since it's the L rune, it's the first letter of Loki's name. Like, that association has kind of been created. Also, like water, and we see Loki shapeshift, and water is changeable, and but yeah. So if you're looking for validation, that's going to be a quick and easy way to do it, for sure.
Love it. Cool.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again. You're amazing. We adore you. And we know our listeners do too.
Yeah, really quickly, where can people follow and find you?
So
and work with you?
Don't follow me at my old URL. That is a personal account now. But you can find me at Wells of Weird on Instagram,
And is
YouTube,
it
weird with a Y specifically.
I thought so.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. No, yeah. Thank you for the distinction.
Yep.
Yeah, Wells of Weird with a Y on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and probably many more places to come here in a little bit.
Amazing.
Great. I'm going to go update my following on TikTok to make sure I'm following you in the right place.
Yeah. Is that your website too, if people wanted to book with you or anything?
The website is upcoming, but that'll probably be what it is. That's
Yeah,
for
I'm sure
baby
there will be a
steps.
link in your bio.
Yes.
People follow Camden for
Yeah.
amazing
Hello.
daily content.
Watch
or
me get
regular
into
content.
arguments with strangers on the internet. It'll be great.
Yes.
It's always
Love
good,
it.
and you're good at it. Keep going.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here, and we hope everyone goes and follows Camden and also is inspired by this. It's always inspiring to have you on, genuinely, because you take things in a different approach
Y'all are
than what we
massive
usually do.
inspirations as well, so I appreciate it. You guys, it's mutually beneficial, healing, whatever you want to call it. Inspirational, I think.
Mutual
is the word I'm going for.
reception.
Yeah.
We got this. Do you want to do the sign off with us, or attempt to do the sign off?
It's not going to
Sure,
go
try.
perfectly,
Or
so
way.
there's no pressure.
Okay.
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 Hope that you 1, 2, 3 go make
Make
some
some
magic.
magic.